guys, what's going on? This is Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com. And today's topic is a confusing one because oftentimes when we speak of this word, we only utilize it in one term or one meaning. But in reality, there's a lot of meanings to the word strength. So before we get into the video, before we start talking about strength, please like and subscribe and leave some comments below on what you feel is strength and how you utilize it in your training. And hopefully this video will open your eyes to what we do here at Winning Strength and why you may be needing to train in different ways. Strength is a term that's often utilized to describe how someone strong is. But in reality, strength has quite a few meanings. And today we must be aware and understand these particular terms on how to make progress. So what we first have to understand is there's three different types of maxes. We have absolute strength, we have maximal voluntary strength, and then we have training strength. These are very different terms, and you'll see here in a second why, but all of these terms are not created equal, and all of them can be used only in certain instances. The first form of strength that we want to talk about is absolute strength. Absolute strength is a strength element that the body most times or almost all the time cannot obtain. This is a strength level in which usually occurs only with external resistance. So if you want to know more about that, go look to the electrical stimulation video that I posted a week or so ago. But absolute strength is not obtainable in normal voluntary or you wanting to turn on muscle contractions. This makes it difficult because we think absolute strength is our 1 rep max on the bench press or our 1 rep max on the squat or a deadlift. But in reality, absolute strength is something we just can't obtain. And usually that's anywhere, depending on if you're a beginner or advanced, can be anywhere from 5 to 8% more than you can contract, upwards of 15, 20, maybe even 30 or 40% more than you contract. We know that beginners tend to have limitations in strength due to the neurological system. So absolute strength is usually the ability to not be able to turn on more muscle fiber at the actual spinal cord, cerebral cortex in and of itself. So again, absolute strength is often a misguided term that tells us muscles that we probably cannot obtain in normal living or contractile conditions. Now, the one that's often confused with absolute strength is maximal voluntary strength, or what we like to term, and Verkhoshansky and a lot of other Eastern Bloc countries like to term, is maximal voluntary strength or competition force maximum. This is without a doubt the highest level in which you can obtain. This means that under extreme conditions, i.e. competitions, high levels of fight or flight, we can obtain this competition force maximum. The problem is that for many people, when they see maximal effort method, they think that competition or CFM maximum is what they're trying to obtain, which is actually incorrect. For most people, maximal voluntary contraction or competition force maximums can usually only be done around every 6 months. This is oftentimes for competitors saved for competitions of higher levels only, i.e. nationals or world or Olympic level competitions, is competition force maximums. So as you can see, competition force maximums, again, are not utilized very often in a smart person's training, and we don't do that either here at winningstrength.com in any of our apps or any of our online coaching. The major reason is that the CNS fatigue of the competition force maximums usually takes anywhere from 10 to 25 days in order to fully and effectively recover from. This can be a huge problem when you utilize the competition force maximums in training. So what I always try to tell people is competition force maximums or good training protocols should be broken into only testing real maxes about every 6 months or so. Now, the training maximum that we should be concerned with is training force maximum. This is training strength or training strong. We call training force maximums. Training force maximums differ from competitive or competition force maximums due to the fact that they're not quite 100%. So you'll notice a lot in our Patreon workouts, TrainHeroic workouts, and things of that nature in online coaching, we usually only like to push to an RPE of about 9. If we do a lot of research in the old Soviet bloc systems books, what we find is that 90% or 9 RPE is totally recoverable in around 3 to 4 days, whereas competition force maximums can take weeks. This is not very good for training modalities or training models of training utilizing full maximal efforts. This is where it gets really confusing because the Russians, when they would talk about maximums, they talked about competition force maximums, which were done very irregular. The Bulgarians would use a maximum term, and they would only go to about a 9 RPE, which was fully recoverable in a regular training cycle. So although the Bulgarians did max, their definition of max was vastly different than in the Russian system. We find that 9 RPE or 90% again is recoverable, and number one, most important, is that usually 90% people's technical capacity can still be maintained. So if we only push to about a 9 RPE, what we find is it actually enhances technical capacity versus competition force maximums oftentimes reduce the technical capacity of the lift due to the fact you're at maximum contraction. So that 10% difference between competitive force maximums and training force maximums is massive when you're looking at a long-term scale of training. Now, the next thing that we want to dive into is what kind of contractions are we talking about when we're talking about strength? So the next big definition of strength, now that we've gotten absolute maximums, training force maximums, and competitive force maximums out of the way, the next thing that we want to dive into is what type of contractions are we talking about being strong or strength is occurring in? Well, one, we have concentric, right? So if we're at the bottom of a bench press or we're at the deadlift off the floor and we have to lift it up, that's concentric. Lowering it is eccentric. So if we take the bench press out and we lower it down, that's an eccentric. Obviously, we can lower more than we can raise. So are we talking eccentric strength or concentric strength? Or are we talking a mixture of both, which most oftentimes is most lifting parameters, right? We don't do a bicep curl and just lift it up and then not lift it down, and vice versa. So concentric and eccentric have different versions of what strength is. The other thing that we have to look at is isometric strength. Isometric strength is muscle contraction with no movement. These can be very, very important in your training as well. Vorbiev, a world champion lifter and researcher in the old Soviet Union, said that a lot of these different variables need to be included in your training in order to elicit a better result. This means that variability in the type of contraction and the percentages in which you're using and the repetitions that you're using play a crucial role in progression because we have something called law of accommodation. Now, the next one we want to talk about is isotonic. Now, this one is not very well known, but isotonic, in my opinion, means same speed. And it means same speed in a lot of other books too. Now, it's very difficult to get pure isotonic muscle contraction. This means that we're lowering it at a certain speed and raising it at a certain speed with no variation in time that it takes to do the rep. I often look at isotonics functionally as doing tempo work. So if we do, say, a 5-second down, 5-second uplift, that can change isotonically because you're changing the repetition speed, whether concentrically, eccentrically, etc. Now, isotonic only usually applies to eccentric and concentric motions because it's moving. So yes, we can do isometrics for time, but because there's no lengthening or shortening, isotonics usually refer to eccentric and concentric motions only. So again, we're looking at concentric movements, eccentric movements, static movements, and same speed movements. So again, this starts to open up your eyes a little bit to how you might be able to adjust and adapt your training. Now, another factor that we have, speaking of isotonics, and we're talking about speed of contraction, is there are different types of strength in these contractile speeds. We have starting strength, which is static overcome by dynamic movement, i.e. a pin pull, a deadlift, a bottom position start bench press. These are starting strengths. You have to overcome a static or non-moving object and create movement with it, which oftentimes creates more pressure than is needed on the bar. So if we need to bench 250 pounds, say off of a pin, it's going to take more than 250 pounds to get it moving, okay? We also have different forms of strength when it requires certain levels of speed to be done. We have strength speed, which is usually a little bit higher on the percentage range, somewhere around 70, 65, 70%. We also have speed strength. Speed strength can be utilized somewhere between the range of 30 and 50, 60%. So as you can see, the percentage of load is important for developing strength, speed, and speed strength, which should start to get your mind turning on why maximal strength is important for athletics. If you're stronger, then the percentage in which the weights you can use for speed strength and strength speed will increase, therefore increase power production. So just training the maximal effort method may not be enough for sporting events or events requiring maximal amounts of power. We have to turn strength into speed, and the way to do that is to lower the percentage of the weight and work on rate of force development. And rate of force development is not necessarily the weight, it's the weight moved with an avenue of time utilized. So what I find is that strength speed is somewhere around 0.7 meters per second, and speed strength is a little bit over 1 meter per second. When I would train and measure this, my 30 and 35% would be between 1.0 and 1.2 meters per second, and my 50s and 55s would be around 0.7, 0.8 meters per second. So now we're changing the time parameter of the strength applied. So I hope this video starts to get you to understand why all of these are relative, why all of these are important, and why your training needs to make sure that you understand these particular methods. Now, for me, it's taken many, many years to work through this, feel this, understand this, and read this, and actually apply this. And that's why we have the apps to help you with your training and make sure that you're doing this and rotating it enough to make sure that you're making proper progress without injury. Oftentimes, you don't see a lot of this variation happening with other lower level or lower educated training modalities because they're focusing on beginners. And any high level book will tell you that beginners will get better at nearly any type of loading parameter. But what I find is, what is our definition of better? Because if we use suboptimal methods, a lot of times our technique won't get any better either. I love to do maximum effort bench pressing, maximum effort for squats, and maximum effort deadlifts. But if the type of exercises that we're using are degrading technique, causing injury, or causing an imbalance in musculature, we have a big problem. And that's why we front load with volume in the beginning with winning warm-ups, and we select our accessory exercises and exercises that we do after our main lift very carefully in order to enhance technique, posture, and all the other factors that not only make us stronger, but make us stronger longer. So this is Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please share, subscribe, and then comment below. And if you have any questions, join Patreon. I'll be more than happy to explain any of this in further detail.